This is another edition of Red Cedar Technologies educational series. In this series, we will cover the many ways HEEDS enables you to discover better product designs faster by automating the exploration of your simulation models. Today, I will be showing you how to use the SolidWorks portal with HEEDS to quickly set up an optimization study and allow HEEDS to modify your design. I will start with a SolidWorks model and tell HEEDS how to automatically modify the inputs and then export the design in a universal CAD language to be run in the analysis of your choice. Here I have an example of a torque arm drawn inside of SolidWorks, and I want to modify the length and location of the slot along the x-axis as well as the radii associated with this slot. To do that, first I want to define the variables of importance to modify this sketch. I'm going to go ahead and do my sketch 1. And you'll see the first variable of importance is going to be this 120 millimeter dimension. And I'm going to go ahead and change this name from D6. We're going to call this X1. So just type X1 and hit enter. I'm going to do the same for this 140 millimeter dimension, which is the length of the slot. I'm going to call that X2. So change from D7 to X2 and hit enter. I'm also going to change the name of these radii. We're going to call this R1, and we'll call this one R2. Now that I have the 4 variables of importance defined, I'm going to exit the sketch. And then what I have to do is, in order for HEEDS to be able to manipulate the geometry, I need to create what's called equations inside of SolidWorks that correspond to these newly named variables. To do this, I'm going to go up into the menu, Tools, and then Equations. And what you'll see here is you'll see a couple of different views in the top left-hand corner. You've got your equation view, your sketch equation view, and you have your dimensions view. And so if I click on my dimensions view, I see all the dimensions associated with this model. You'll notice here how most of them are just D1 and D2, the standard names for SolidWorks, but you'll also see the 4 variables that we've previously defined as X1, X2, R1, and R2. And we can see their associated values with them as well. And so now what I need to do is I need to create equations based on these dimensions that are seen here. And there's 2 different ways to do that. The first is, if you notice, this dimension here is called X1 at sketch 1. You have to have that full name. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead back into the equation view. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to type in that name exactly like you saw it, X1 at sketch 1. I'm going to go ahead and hit tab. It's going to change from red to black font. And then I'm going to put in the value for it, which is 120 millimeters. I'm going to hit enter. You'll see that it equals 120 and then it evaluates to 120 millimeters. You'll also notice if we go back to the dimension view that now X1 equals 120 instead of being 120 millimeters defined by an actual value. The other way that you can actually add equations is you can go to the sketch equation view. So if I do this, and then what I can do is I can simply activate the sketch 1. So if I click on it once, you'll notice here how the 120 millimeters, which we've now called X1 at sketch 1, we've defined it as an equation, has the equation symbol directly next to it. So if I want to add more equations here, I can simply click on the add equation and go to the 140 and click on that, and you'll see that it automatically populates with X2 at sketch 1. I'm going to call this 140 millimeters. Once that's defined, you see when clicking back on the sketch, now the 120 and the 140 both have the equation symbols next to them. I'm going to go ahead back into the equation view, and I'm going to add the last 2. And R2 at sketch 1. Okay, so now I have my model fully defined, and just to show you what HEEDS is going to do is it's basically going to modify the values here. So I'm going to change this to 140, and you'll see how the model gets automatically updated and rebuilt. The last thing I want to mention is that there are certain responses that can be exported automatically from SolidWorks. One of them is the mass properties is automatically done in HEEDS. It's automatically read by HEEDS, provided that I have a material assigned to the model. And so here you can see the model is made from 1060 alloy, as defined there. And so say I want to, I not only want my mass property, which will automatically be exported in HEEDS, and I'll show you that when we get to the HEEDS portion, but I also want to know my center of mass. Let's say my center of mass on the X, in the X direction, because I want to have that be a constraint on the design. And so clicking tab on that, you'll see that it goes again from red to black, meaning it's a valid name. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead into File Properties, and you'll see the different options from a mass evaluation. And the one for importance for this example is the center of mass, X. So I'm going to click on that. You'll see that it evaluates if I hit enter, and it evaluates at 207.79. And so if we go back and we say, okay, well, let's change this value again, we'll see how our center of mass changes as well. So once I have my 4 variables defined and any responses that I want to export defined as well, I can click OK and then save the analysis. Now that my SolidWorks model has been saved, I can open up HEEDS and I can start my HEEDS analysis. And so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to change from a generic analysis. I'm going to use the SolidWorks portal. So I'm going to go down in the drop-down menu and click on SolidWorks. The next thing I have to do is I have to define my input and output file names. So I'm going to right-click on input file and add input file. I'm then going to choose the geometry that I just created. And in this example, I'm not going to show you auto tagging, so I'm just going to click continue. You'll see how the output file has the same name as the input file, and it's automatically added to the output files. So in order for HEEDS to export a universal CAD language, I'm going to go ahead and click on the SolidWorks portal. And then all I have to do is in this drop-down menu next to the CAD export format, I'm going to change that from none to a parasolid. And what HEEDS will then do is it will create a parasolid with the same name as your input file, but with a different extension to it. Also too, if you had a macro that you wanted to do inside of SolidWorks, you could add it to either one of these sections here, depending on whether or not the macro was executed prior to the variable values being set or after. So for example, if you had one that was prior to, HEEDS would execute the macro and then it would modify the variable names. Whereas if it were after, it would execute the variable value changes, then it would run the macro, and then it would do any responses that it needed to extract. Also too, clicking on the visualization tab, you'll notice that there's one image that gets exported. It's the view in your SolidWorks file. And that's helpful for seeing geometric changes to your model. So once that's defined, my input and my output files have been defined. From there, I'm going to go into my parameters tab. And you'll see here how I already have my 4 variables defined, x1, x2, r1, and r2. They are all continuous variables, and they range in value from their minimum to their maximum, and then the baseline design that I have already created is defined as the baseline values here. Click on responses, you'll see the mass, which as I mentioned previously is automatically exported by HEEDS, as well as my center of mass in the X direction, which I'm going to tag as well. So continuing on, I go to the tagging tab. I'm going to choose from the drop-down menu my input part file, which corresponds to the green arrow. From there, I'm going to click on the equations. And I have my x1, x2, r1, and r2 all present there. And so I'm going to choose x1, tag, x2, tag, r1 in the drop-down menu, tag, r2 in the drop-down for the variable list, and tag that as well. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and change from the input file, which has the green arrow, to the blue arrow, which corresponds to the output files. Again, I'm going to click on my equation, and you'll see here how I have my center of mass in the X direction as well as mass. So I can tag mass there, and my center of mass in the X direction, and tag that there. So that concludes the SolidWorks portal. For questions regarding further analysis inside of HEEDS, please consult the full demonstration video. Thank you.